welcome to the latest edition of Nebraska Football Now. I'm your host, Andy Klassen, joined again by our Husker insider, Jake Bartecki. Jake, how are we doing?
Doing well, man. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I have a question, though, for you.
What's that?
If there is a football god, why does he hate Nebraska so much?
You and a lot of other people are asking that exact same thing, my friend. You and a lot of other people.
Well, then let's just rip off the Band-Aid and dive right into it. Kind of break down USC a little bit. So many things happened throughout that game, but what was so fascinating to me was it was just old script. It felt like this is a typical Nebraska game, even though there's so many twists and churns, passes deflecting off our defenders for touchdowns, no calls, inopportune penalties. It all just, I felt like your average Nebraska fan's like, this felt right. We're going to go on the road, we're going to make it a game, but ultimately we're going to lose a close one.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said what I was going to say. I think if you asked any Nebraska fan to summarize the last, 8 years of Husker football, I think that game in its summation was probably that. The play that I really look at is the one that Malcolm Hartzog had for an interception, knocked off his helmet and into the hands of the receiver for a touchdown, the no call at the end of the game.
Yeah.
And it's almost to the point where a lot of fans, I'm getting the sense, are so just worn down and used to this now that they really aren't even quote-unquote angry or upset. They just are used to it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a dangerous spot for Nebraska football to be in, maybe a little apathy setting in there. And the university and the coaches, they've been trying, right? And let's talk about one of our new coaches, Holgerson. I had some things to say during his presser, and we'll get into that. But what were your first impressions with the offense? Did some good things, but also we saw some shortcomings.
Yeah, I think they were better in perimeter blocking. I thought that was one that I pointed to and thought they did pretty well. I think they were able to kind of open up some of the short pass game. I talked last week where I sort of feel like the middle ground was you weren't going to see an air raid, but you were going to see more passes down the field. I think we saw that. Dylan Raiola, though, man, I mean, I think we've talked about it in the past. Is he regressing, and why is he regressing? He did not have his best game. I mean, he missed open targets. He was a one-read quarterback and threw an interception because of it. So it's a little concerning, that side of it, the Raiola side, but it's really tough. I mean, Holgerson was kind of working off of nothing, right? I mean, he didn't really know who he was going to have. And at the end of the day, personnel is personnel, so you got to use the guys you have.
No doubt. And Holgerson did say some things during his presser earlier this week. Let's cut to that because you brought it up, and also he kind of struck at the heart of an issue that we've been talking about for a while now.
I was like, guys, I said, you guys are fairly big kids. I know 17's not a big kid, but he's a tough kid. But there's some good-sized kids out there, I mean, 16, 18, 4. I mean, these guys, 29, these guys are big bodies. I'm like, why are you not blocking worth the crap on the perimeter? I mean, it's embarrassing. I mean, you got being a receiver, you just think, the one touches, throw me the ball. First thing I said to him, if you don't start blocking out there, then you're not going to get the ball thrown to you.
Well, okay, there it is, Jake. I mean, he's, not mincing words. He's talking about that perimeter blocking and how these receivers that we have and that we brought in, they're big-bodied dudes. They want the ball, they want the glamorous stuff, but you got to do the tough stuff too, don't you?
Yeah, and I thought they did a better job of it. I mean, he called him out on it, said it was embarrassing, which I agree. I mean, you've got two guys that are over 6'3", and you're unable to open up a short pass off a perimeter block. That's just not going to cut it in the Big Ten. I mean, this is not a cookie-cutter football league now. I mean, you've got 18 teams in this league, all of which have the ability, I think, to surprise the other, with the exception of one or two. You've got to be able to do those fundamentals and those little things right. I thought Nayor was better. I thought Jamal Banks had a pretty good game blocking as well. So maybe they took some of that to heart, put it out on the field. We'll see how it goes for these next 2 weeks.
And we also saw some new receivers, or receivers we saw before, get kind of put back into the fold. You alluded to it earlier, Raiola. He's missing some open targets. That's been kind of a growing trend lately, unfortunately. What do you make of that? Is it the pressure being all put on the 19-year-old and he's feeling it? We haven't been to a bowl game in 8 years. Where do you feel that, and you're around the program more than a lot of folks are, what do you think is going through Raiola's head right now?
Well, I think he's probably a little concerned about making mistakes because, he has a route, there's a play, and I think, most quarterbacks look at their first target, and that's who they throw to. And that's easy to do, especially for a younger quarterback. I mean, that seems safer, it seems more comfortable. But teams have sort of begun, I think, to realize that. And they've begun to realize, okay, he's going to look at this number one target. Let's figure out who the number one target is. They leave somebody else open. And I look at the play down near the goal line where Nebraska took 3 off the forced fumble, took a field goal. Jamal Banks was wide open at the 1-yard line, caught that, or could have caught that, and could have stepped into the end zone for a touchdown. I mean, he missed that guy wide open. And I think we've talked about this as well. I think he throws a little bit off of adrenaline. He sees a wide open receiver down the field. His eyes get wide. He overthrows him. The 3 throws I think about, Lindenmeyer, Illinois game, Barney, and Banks in the Ohio State game. So, part of that's being young, and I think he'll get more comfortable with it. Maybe Dana Holgorsen will help him with it.
Yeah, and he just put a little too much sauce on it, right? Put a little too much on it or not enough air under it. And you speak of Holgorsen, talk about Coach Rule, trying to make the young man more comfortable back there, right? We got some audio from Coach Rule. Let's cut to that right now.
I mean, just to put it in context what Dana did, it would be like you guys, having to write this on a deadline and having to write it in Italian with a translator next to you. It'd be hard, right? This is all new language. We're in 2 minutes, and he's, I thought Glenn and Garrett did a great job of helping. I thought Dana prepared at a really high level. I think that will only get better and better and better. And again, that I left that game, as I said, feeling encouraged about, hey, the offense is at some point here going to really take off with kind of the direction we're headed.
So, Jake, I think that kind of plays into it, in part anyway. Coach Rule trying to make this offense comfortable, but he recognizes a new offensive coordinator, a new playbook, new verbiage. It all kind of adds up. I appreciate that he's taken a lighthearted approach to it.
Yeah.
Kind of fun. But wins and losses is where it's at, right?
Right. I mean, I can tell you from experience, I don't think I'd be able to write a story on a deadline in Italian with a translator. So, he's being candid about it. And again, I think it goes back to I credit him for making the move. And I think part of the reason Coach Rule made this move, which is very unusual this late in the season, to take such an important role in the coaching staff and completely bring somebody in who wasn't even in the program during training camp. That takes some guts, right? I think it's because he knows the importance of making a bowl game and getting win number 6 to the fan base.
So, tip your cap in that regard at least, Let's shift gears a little bit here. Let's flip it over to the defense. There's some good, there's some bad. I'll tell you one thing that did go right, Sierra Wright, obviously is pick 6. But then that also kind of left everyone wondering, well, what's going on with the rest of the secondary?
Right. Well, what a homecoming for Sierra Wright. I mean, he's got the nickname on the team now of Hollywood. I think play that well in Hollywood, that had to make him feel pretty good. So, a pick 6 to get Nebraska out front early, a huge, huge blocked field goal, which, you look at the score, kept them in the game at the very end. I mean, if that goes through, Nebraska's chasing down the field to try and, chase a cover, not just the tie and maybe the win. You mentioned the rest of the defense. I think they missed a lot of assignments. You heard Matt Rule talk about that a little bit. I mean, they were kind of guessing, it seemed like, on what coverage they were playing, cover 3 or cover 4. And I don't think they really were beat that well man-to-man. I will say, I think Malcolm Hartzog is the one who is getting beat man-to-man. I think he's a little undersized. I think he's a little slow compared to some of the receivers he's gone up against. And that's a product of the league growing, right? I mean, you're going to start playing athletes and receivers who are a little bigger, a little faster. And I think that's something Coach Rule and Tony White will have to adjust their scheme for.
So do you feel it's more of missing assignments, not necessarily a talent issue? That's a tough discussion, but sometimes I feel like we're just outgunned or we're not fast enough, but you're thinking it's more on the assignment side?
A little bit. I mean, there are chances. I mean, Tommy Hill's gotten beat a few times this season, and I think that first touchdown for USC, I thought his effort to go up and try and block one of those throws down the field wasn't the best. I think he kind of gave up on the tackle. But I really think, I mean, if you look at it, Nebraska kind of gets a little confused defensively, and I don't think they're always on the same page, and that's where I think the assignments part comes from.
Yeah. We talked about the pressure starting to mount and people starting to feel it and talk about it, right? We haven't been in a bowl game in forever.
Yeah.
And then we also saw some bad calls. Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah.
There's some bad calls. Some national pundits, sent it out on X, and it was very obvious. I almost feel like it's under a microscope and it gets blown up so much more so because of this pressure. Because I don't feel that those play calls really decided the game in the end. Nebraska had opportunities and just didn't take advantage.
Yeah, you thought the penalties were what decided it. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, and it wasn't even all at the end. It was at the beginning too.
Yeah.
I mean, dropped passes, dropped interceptions. I mean, they had chance after chance after chance. Dylan Raiola sliding early when not knowing where the sticks were for a first down. Another one I'd point to that cost Nebraska a timeout. Matt Rule takes a timeout, then brings the back the unit on to punt, and then takes the delay of game. I feel like if you're just going to take the delay of game, take the delay of game.
Right.
Unless there was something there that you saw, maybe you were going to run a fake. I don't think Nebraska has the special teams unit to really think about that being in the equation. They've done it once this season and it worked.
Yeah.
I don't think that was the situation there. I mean, there were mistakes made that early on in the game and throughout the game that I think were more glaring.
Well, one thing that Nebraska did show, and they showed it against Ohio State, they can hang in there, they can play, they can challenge anybody in the league or otherwise. So, turn the page, here we go. Wisconsin's up on deck. Much like USC before them, they're having their own issues right now. They just had a coaching change, so maybe the time is right. But historically, since Nebraska's joined the Big Ten, it's been a one-sided rivalry, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, you got an OC who's been on campus for 1 week and, well, I guess 2 weeks now, one game, versus an OC who's been on 1 week and hasn't coached a game, right, at that position. So, I guess advantage Nebraska, maybe. I don't really know. But yeah, it's tough to say why Wisconsin's dominated this much, because you kind of look at the comparisons between kind of funding for the athletic programs. Nebraska and Wisconsin should be right along with each other for pretty much every single sport, and they are for a lot other than football.
Right.
And it's been dominated, but it's been dominated in a weird way. Like, Nebraska doesn't always get blown out by Wisconsin. That's happened. But Wisconsin seems to always have one or two different elements that they don't. If it's the run game, if it's a pass rush, if it's a pass defense, which they have a very good one of this year, second in the Big Ten there. They've always had just a little bit more than what Nebraska has had in this rivalry. I sort of feel, though, right now that could go the other way. Like, I feel like Nebraska now has a quarterback better than they've had in those 12 years.
Right. Would you almost want to make the comparison, the old Big 12 days to Texas? I always felt like the Longhorns would beat Nebraska when we were good. They'd beat Nebraska when we were bad. Kind of like Wisconsin. It doesn't matter the scenario. They always end up with the victory over Nebraska.
Oh, it's a great comparison, too, because there were a lot of close games in those rivalries as well. And that's part of being dominated is in those close games. The reason that Nebraska lost was Wisconsin had something just a little bit better that Nebraska couldn't defend or respond to.
All right, let's line it up one more time. Bowl eligibility on the line. What's your Wisconsin prediction?
We're going bowling. We're taking Nebraska to win. This is crazy that I'm about to call this a scoring explosion. 24-20 Nebraska. Now, I said 28-20 USC last week. Was spot on. Not guaranteeing I will be again. This is much bolder to say Nebraska's going to put up 24 points. 3 offensive touchdowns. Nebraska wins by 4.
I really like that. Last week I thought our defense would step up. Over that, beyond that. I like the idea of both offenses showing up. It's the strong suit of probably both teams right now, if you're being honest. So I'm going to go 28-27. Nebraska gets the win. They get to bowl eligibility. Go Big Red.
Is that a game-winning touchdown in the last drive?
Ooh, I'd like to say so, but that's hard to say. It's going to come down to the wire.
Yeah. Nebraska's had the ball the last 3 games on the final drive, so maybe the 4th time's the charm.
Well, Jake, thanks for swinging by and sharing that wonderful information with us. And thank you for joining us on another Nebraska Football Now here on News Channel Nebraska.